Hello and welcome back to the Weighted Native Chronicles. What we're going to do today is we're going to change the oil on a Honda TRX500 Rubicon. So we're going to get this thing started up first to warm up the oil, and then we'll get started. Let it warm up for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that, just to get the oil warmed up and it pours out easy. Okay, so while the quad is warming up in the background, let's just take a quick look at what kind of stuff you're going to need to do this oil change. So probably we're going to want 5 gallons of oil. From what I hear, it's best to avoid synthetic oil because it might cause your hydrostatic transmission to not function properly. So go with 10W40 oil. I've got the Honda stuff here. Another thing you might want to have is some paper towels, clean up. You also want to have an oil pan, and you'll notice this oil pan is clean. So the reason I want it to be clean is so that after I dump the oil, that I can take a look at it and see if there's, and pour it out, you can see if there's any metal filings in there. There will likely be 1, 2, or 3, but it shouldn't be a whole pile. If there is, then you know you got some problems you got to look into. So start off with a clean pan, and then you can pick up on stuff like that. Another thing you're going to need is an oil filter. Have a flat blade screwdriver that you can use to pry the oil filter out. It's a good idea to have a torque wrench. A lot of us just do it by feel, but it doesn't hurt to use a torque wrench, something that's about 20 foot-pounds, and then you're going to have a socket wrench with an extension and a let's see, this is a 17 millimeter bit or socket, and a 12 millimeter socket. 12 millimeters for the air filter, the oil filter. So, if you have all that stuff, then the only thing left is maybe to have a tub to empty your oil in. And there's one more thing. You might also want to have yourself an oil filler funnel. I use a type like this because you're going to have to pour your oil into a small hole. So this works just perfectly for that. You can kind of put the end in, and then you can open up the valve and let it pour through. So whatever way works for you, that's what I use. Okay, the next step is to take this oil filler cap off. By the way, while we're looking at it, if you want to check your oil, then you unscrew this dipstick. I won't do it now. And after you've warmed up the engine and let the ATV sit for about 3 minutes, then unscrew it, take it out, wipe it, put it back in, but don't screw it in, just let it sit on the top of the threads, and then take it out, see if it's between the low and the full mark. So, okay, let's go ahead. Let's take this filler cap off. Now, the reason I'm taking this cap off is because you can see there's a little O-ring around the edge there. So check that out a little bit. Maybe wipe it off so you can see it. Make sure there's no damage to that oil O-ring. If there is, then replace it. Okay, we're going to just take that off and leave that aside now. Okay, so now we're sitting with
underneath the quad, and in order to get the drain bolts off, we have to take this skid plate off. So I don't know if everybody has that on their quad, but if you do, now it's a little more work. It's nice to have though. So actually for this you're going to need a 12mm socket. So let's just get these guys off of here. There's 4 of these bolts. There's one here and one here, and then there's, oh yeah, there we are. Okay, so we have one over here, and then we have one over here. So let's take those guys off, and then we'll get to the drain bolts. Okay folks, now we have the skid plate off. Now we have the underside exposed. There's the oil filter there, and we have over here, that is the front drain bolt, and so we've got our oil filter here, and then over here have the main drain bolt. So we're going to take off that rear one first, and a mistake that I hear a lot of people make is they think that just taking this one out is going to be all you need to do, and then they go and dump 5 gallons of oil in the engine and find they're way overfilled, so you can damage the quad. So you really have to make sure that you're aware of the fact that after you drain that one, you have to drain this one as well. So let's get to work on, got my oil pan here. Let's break this guy free. Okay. Get that in there a little bit better. Okay. I'm gonna unscrew it a bit. Now, I'm going to have the oil pan underneath here, more or less. And hopefully it doesn't spray all over my camera or anything silly like that, right? I just taken the extension off the ratchet so I can turn this easy, right? And since the oil filler cap is taken off the top, then the oil should flow out of here nicely. There we go. There we go. Okay, so let's see how that's going here. Now, get an idea of how dirty that oil is. It definitely looks like it could use a change. So that's our oil draining, and I'll take this. Now this plug here has a seal washer on it, and you want to check, make sure that that's not damaged or anything. Should have an extra seal washer with you just in case. And if this one is damaged, then replace that. But I'm just going to let this drain for a while. It didn't take very long to empty out. And we'll get to the front one next. Okay, so now to drain the crankcase oil, I'm going to dump this away here. Careful, you can just pour it in. Let's see how well I do here. And the fact that I started off with a clean basin, I should be able to tell whether I've got a bunch of metal filings or not. So we'll see here. That's where it helps that the oil is warm so it flows good. So here we go. That's all out. Actually, if you look at that, that's looking mighty good.
this engine should be in good shape, I think. No metal filings. Just what we'd like to see. Okay, so got the crankcase bolt out and drained, and now we're going to move on to the oil tank. Get that guy out of there. Okay, get my basin here, and we'll get this guy out of here. This one also, this bolt should have an oil seal. Now I noticed when I took the first one out, once I looked at it closely, it didn't have an oil seal washer. So I have an extra one. So I've used up that oil seal on that one now, and I'm hoping that this one has an oil seal, and what do you know, it does have an oil seal. So I'll inspect this one. Hopefully this is a good one and I can reuse it. But looks like we're draining her out good now, so I'm going to let this sit for a little bit, and then once she's drained, I'm going to check the oil for any filings that come out of this one as well. But so far it looks pretty good. I've left the crankcase bolt off, and I've got just a little bowl here catching the final drippings so it doesn't go on the grass. It's kind of nice working on the grass actually, and I'm glad that I have a oil seal for this bolt, so I do have enough. Next thing we're going to do after this is we're going to take that oil filter off, and that's where we might have to pry on it a little bit around the lip there to get that cap off. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so I've now emptied out the oil tank oil, and as you can see, nice and clear, not a bunch of metal shavings in there, so happy to see that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get on to taking off the oil filter. And now for some more fun, we're going to get this oil filter off. Make sure you get that socket on there good. I want to get this oil pan underneath here just in case. Let's loose it early. Actually, I'll center it a bit more because it'll drip around the edges of that flange maybe. Okay, got this thing loosened off. See, that's how the flange is still sticking on there. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a screwdriver and find it. I'm going to try to pry this thing off. Oh yeah, there she goes. See that? Oh shit, splashed myself. Okay, so there we go. The whole shebang fell in the oil. Oh, whoops, I was mistaken. Actually, the oil filter did come out. It fell down so fast and unexpectedly. I thought just the flange fell off and the oil filter was still stuck in there. But no, we got the whole thing here. So let's take this out to the bench and take a look at this and put the new oil filter in. Okay, now I've got the oil filter out. When it fell out of the filter bracket, this little spring fell into the drain too. So we got this, we got the old oil filter, and we got this new one, and the cap there. So the way this is going to go together, you want to check your O-rings here, make sure that they're not damaged. And I've cleaned the inside surface where the oil filter goes already, so I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to put that spring on there, and we'll put this oil filter on there so it has a little bit of spring to it. Now, the one other thing you want to do is you want to put a little bit of oil on this O-ring to keep it from drying out, and then it also screws in with less friction. So maybe I'll just touch, and you really should use fresh oil. So I'm going to take some of the new oil I bought here. If I can get that cap off, just dip my finger in there a little bit and just smooth some of this nice fresh oil on there. Okay, so now we're ready to put this thing back in. Okay, now that I got the oil filter out, I'm going to take a paper towel. I'm going to clean off the inside surface where the seal goes. Okay, so now let's get this big filter back in there. Oh, concentrate on getting this thing on there. So we'll take this, screw it in a little bit. Yeah, she's tightening in there good now. Okay, now we're going to put a little bit of more tightness on it. Okay, everybody has their own way of doing things. What I like to do is I like to get everything, all my bolts put in and snugged in. So I'm going to snug this one up just a bit, not to torque, and then I'm going to put in the crankcase plug and also the oil tank plug. Just kind of tighten them a bit. Then I'll get my torque wrench and I'll give them a good snug. So on this oil filter, what you want to have is 13 foot-pounds according to the manual, and for the oil tank and crankcase you want to have 18 foot-pounds. So we'll just go ahead and do that. You can also tighten it just by guessing, but the main thing is not to over tighten it, because if you over tighten these drain plugs, you're just going to strip it out, and then you got a real world of problems. Okay, so I'll get on to that next. Okay, I've tightened the oil filter on to 13 foot-pounds and the crankcase plug to 13, and so now we just have the oil drain, and I got my torque wrench on there. There. That's now 18 foot-pounds on that too. So not over tightened and not under tightened. Just what we want.
Is that imperfect?
Yeah.
Oh, you're spilling.
Ooh. Okay, so we have our 4.6 liters of oil here, and we got the little buddy boy here, my grandson. He's gonna help hold the funnel, and we're just gonna slowly pour this in there.
Yep. Oh, that looks satisfying. It looks like honey.
Mm-hmm. It's gonna take a little while,
Not too long.
but don't move the bottom so that it comes out of that hole, right?
Yeah.
have to be very steady. Looks like she's going good. Okay, so we've now filled up the crankcase and the oil tank in one shot there with 4.6 liters of oil, like it says in the book. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start the quad up for a bit. I'm going to let it run for about 5 minutes or so and let it warm up. And while it's running, I'm going to take a look underneath the machine. This is very important. Take a look underneath while it's running and see if there's any oil drops coming out, because if there are, then you really got a problem. So just make sure of that. So I'm going to let it run. After 5 minutes, I'll let it sit for about 3 minutes, and then I'll check the oil dipstick and make sure she's at the right level. So let's get that part done. Don't rev it or nothing. Just let it fill up the oil filter. So, what do you think, Noah? This is my helper. Well, and then after this, I'm leaving the skid plate off because I want to be able to check for leaks underneath there. But once I'm satisfied it's got the right oil level and there's no leaks, then I'm gonna take this skid plate and I'm gonna put that back on, which is pretty simple. You saw me take it off, so just the reverse of what you saw. And I think that's just about it. So, from the Way to Native Chronicles, I want to wish you God bless, and we'll catch you next time. I hope you got something out of this video, and I hope you also click subscribe so you can catch more stuff. Your support means a lot to us. It really keeps things going here. So, from me and Nolan, next time, folks.
你得走，等那拉开开火去，你看那去。